official. It's official.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Regina Bradley, and this is Outkasted Conversations number 10. So today I'm really excited to talk to my guest, the one, the only, the fantastic Dr. James B. Peterson. What's going on, good sir?
Good morning. I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. All professional and sophisticated and things.
Yeah,
Okay.
I figure I put my uniform on for you.
Yeah, put on the battle armor. Put on the battle armor.
That's right.
We're gonna have a good conversation. So, for the people who aren't familiar with who you are or don't watch MSNBC, tell the people who you are and what you got going on.
I'm the director of Africana Studies and associate professor of English at Lehigh University, and I'm also an MSNBC contributor. And I've been someone who's been writing about and teaching about hip hop culture for a long time now.
Long time.
Long time. Yes.
So, you know how we get these conversations started. Let me go ahead and throw this out there. How did you become outcasted?
Yeah, I guess I was outcasted like right from the gate. So I went to Duke undergrad, so I was in the South, and I did my master's at North Carolina State, and actually Southern Playalistic Cadillac Funky Music came out while I was working on my master's degree. And there's two interesting things that really, I think, made Outkast appeal to me immediately. Number one, because I had been in the South for so long, a lot of Southern hip hop wasn't really, you didn't think of it as being super intellectual or super sophisticated. It was dope music and everybody loved it. But between like the West Coast and what was coming up from the South in the early 90s, you kind of had a sense that aside from the Ghetto Boys, there had really been nobody who had defined sort of the organic intellectualism that you find in the South through hip-hop. And so Southern Playalistic was just that. If you were in North Carolina in 1994, that really captured the ethos of young people and people my age in their early 20s who were listening to hip-hop and really searching for something like more complex, more sophisticated. The rhythms and the beats were always dope. But Outkast immediately brought like different layers to the music that people could just really, really get into. And it also, Southern Playalistic has a very like come up kind of sensibility to it, like, get up, get out and get something. You know what I mean? Like that is what people were feeling. And so, that first album, the first singles from the album, the first videos from the album, all of that, I was hooked right from the beginning. By the way, I knew also very early on that we were looking at one of the greatest duos in hip hop. Just the way they played off of each other, like linguistically, and the kind of the difference in their styles and how seamlessly their styles fit together. It was really clear to me because I was a huge EPMD fan. When I was younger, and I think if you listen to EPMD now, it sounds very simplistic, but I think what people miss about EPMD is just the way they fit together, the way they could go back and forth, the seamless interplay lyrically of them, and Andre 3000 and Big Boy had that. They had that sort of like, you could tell they had been rhyming together for a while, and so Southern Playalistic Cadillac Funky Music was just, it was a revelation at a time where I feel like, Southern hip hop up to that moment had really been defined by, like Two Live Crew and like other forms of music that were really rhythmically and percussively based. That's dope. But these were the first guys that I was hearing that were making music that sort of matched the intellectual sophistication of the late 80s that we saw in hip hop culture. So Outkast was, at the same time that they were something brand new, you could tell they were vanguard cutting edge, they were also a little bit of a throwback, a duo rhyming, they had the sort of the aesthetic sensibilities that I think a lot of East Coast cats had, but it was in a Southern context, so it was undeniable and irresistible at the same time.
Yo, so where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
I'm from the bricks.
You was an honorary Southerner, so we just embraced you like that.
So at that point in my life, I had spent 4 or 5 years in North Carolina, and was going to spend another year or two there, and so I was an honorary Southerner in the sense that you know, when you there's a lot of East Coast cats and West Coast cats who come to a school in the South and they just try to like rep hard from where they're from. Like, yeah, I'm from New York, and that's it. You know, like the New York contingent here, and we got this contingent here. You know, the way that Duke was set up is that you had a lot of people from Jersey and New York, but you also had a lot of people from D.C., a lot of people from North Carolina. There was no way to like dominate as like some East Coast person. You had to come in and get in, understand what was going on. And, you know, Durham is a very southern city. It's not as far south as Atlanta, but it is a very southern city. So in order to like be there and live there, you got to understand the history and the culture. And you know, my family, like many people's families, come from the South, and so it wasn't my first time in the South. But being in the South in school, you learn a lot about like how young people come up in the South and what their issues and challenges are. And so before Outkast's first album came out, I had a great sort of indoctrination into Black Southern youth culture. So I was very much sensitized to those aesthetic sensibilities.
Dope. So, what's your favorite Kast album? Is that fair?
Oh man. Oh no. Okay. So that's not a fair question. What I would say is that, and I'll give you what my favorite album is in a second, but I would say that just because of me becoming an adult at the moment that they began their careers, I really felt like they made albums and they made music that really reflected different stages of my life, right? And so Southern Playalistic was an album that really helped me to celebrate the South at a moment where I'm like in my last couple years in the South, and I loved Duke, I loved NC State, I loved North Carolina. So their first album helped me to celebrate like where I was and where I was living. You know, by the time Atlanteans comes out, you know, I've already started graduate school at UPenn. I'm back up in the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic area. But man, Elevators, and I have a whole separate thing about Elevators. But when Elevators drops, you know, that's certainly my favorite Outkast song is Elevators. It just represented everything that I was about at that moment, just trying to come up. I'm in grad school. I've been grinding, hustling. You know, a lot of people didn't understand what I was doing being in grad school. They didn't see that come up. And just the way that the analogy of Elevators was just a powerful, powerful thing to me. I still put that song on. I just feel it in here. And you know, and then you know, after that, as they became more like avant-garde, they were working with different sounds and stuff like that. You know, I know a lot of people love Stankonia, and I think it's a great record. Not my favorite necessarily, but you know, again, it just kind of hit at a time where I was like experimenting with different ideas and trying to think about different like aesthetics and things like that. You know, when Aquemini drops, I'm overseas and I'm in London, and I'm telling you, like, even like I still play Nathan right now. Just the little thing before Liberation, the little interlude before Liberation where Nathan is calling from jail, from the prison cell. You're talking about when he gets out, he's going to eat some steak and shrimp. Like, when I was in London, I felt so claustrophobic at times. I was so contained because it wasn't my city, it wasn't my country, and it was just, I was so poor there and everything. And so I still listen to that and get inspired by that. Liberation, by the way, is also one of my favorite Outkast songs. Not quite the same as Elevators, but the same kind of like, it makes me feel a certain kind of way. I know Aquemini got the 5 mics. I still don't know if that's the best Outkast album. No, great record. Not sure if it's the best. But the reality is my favorite Outkast album is The Love Below.
Really?
And it really is. It really is. And I know that's not the most hip-hop album. I know Big Boy's not on there. But the double album is dope. I mean, Speaker Box and Love Below together are fantastic. But The Love Below, for me, that's the record, the first Outkast record that I could share with my family. It comes out at a time where my kids are young. There's a lot of songs on it that my kids can listen to. You put on Hey Ya right now, my kids will do a music video for you right now, right? And so I think the different stages of my life matched kind of where they were. We're probably around the same age as well, so matched kind of where they were at certain points of time. And I have to say The Love Below because, again, that's the Outkast album I could share with my family. And the experience of being able to do it. I remember we took a drive. Don't ask why we were doing this, but we drove from Philly to Miami and made stops in D.C., Durham, and Atlanta on the way down. And we had the Love Box. I mean, we had the not Speaker Box, but the Love Below on rotation for that whole 19 hours there and back. And there's only a couple songs you have to skip, or a couple of places you have to skip. And again, you can have kids listen to it, and the music is so powerful and so beautiful. The kids loved it, and the experience is such a old head hip hop thing to say. But the albums that I tend to love most now are usually the ones I can share with my kids.
No, that sounds like a hip hop dad. That's dope though. That's dope. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm shady.
What's your favorite? What do you pick if you had to choose your favorite album? It's easier for me to choose songs, but if you had to choose, let me rephrase it. For you, what's the strongest or the most compelling Outkast album for you?
Man, it fluctuates. Right now it's AT-Aliens. There's just something about that whole joint that I'm just like, I can definitely relate to that idea of isolation and trying to reconstruct your identity and trying to fit in and be aware. But Aquemini is a close second. Like it's a real. I guess it depends on how I'm feeling. Because Liberation is in my top 3 songs ever.
Absolutely.
Ever.
It's an incredible song.
And it's hard because I think that my favorite Outkast song is In Due Time, which was on the Soul Food album. Yeah. And a lot of people don't remember that particular joint, but it got me through my dissertation. It got me through, the deaths of my father and my grandfather. You know what I'm saying? It was just something about, keep your faith in me. You get where you need to be in due time. And I'm like, all right, well, that's all I need to know then.
It's a beautiful song. It's a beautiful song.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where I'm at. I think that AT-Aliens for me is a game changer. I think it's at the top of the list.
It definitely was a game changer for them as a group as well, because it really proved that they had staying power. There was not going to be any kind of sophomore slump. It proved a lot of things for them. But I think that Southern Playalistic is a little bit better as an album than AT-Aliens. I just, you know what I mean? Like when I listen to them side by side, I'm still vibing on over the long haul of the album a little bit more on Southern Playlist, just for me. Like, it's hard for me to have the conversation of greatest Outkast albums without including their first record.
I mean, I think they fall into that unspoken hip hop rule that your first album is always a classic.
Right. For certain groups, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean it's not that I don't love Southern Playalistic, because I do. It's just like I just feel like it's a classic. It's on that classic shelf. So it's kind of like a given that is just unbelievably dope. But in your work, I mean, you do some really tight work. Like it's really helped me think about hip hop in terms of the literary tradition. But you have, we've talked about this before, but you have this particular article on the bigger figure.
The piece you like a lot, yes.
I do like this piece a lot. And it's on the bigger figure in hip hop. And so you're taking this idea of the trope of Bigger Thomas from Native Son, right? And applying it to how we think about black masculinity in hip hop. And I have to, we talked about it through Tupac and a couple of other folks. And I asked you, how do Southern rappers fit into that? And you said you had to think about it. You've had time to think about it.
I have had time to think about it.
To start it, who would you consider to be? Well, explain, what the bigger figure is for you, and then who do you think from Southern hip hop would fit into that trope?
Right, and so couple of things here. The work in that piece is really inspired by the quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates about Biggie Smalls and Bigger Thomas, famous quote that uses the epigraph, and also by the work of Imani Perry, who in the Prophets of the Hood, she spends a lot of time talking about some of these literary interfaces, and it kind of charges people to think more about the ways in which Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man and Native Son and Bigger Thomas, how those figures are represented within hip hop. And so I took that charge and wrote this Bigger Figures piece. And when I initially conceptualized it, and you will see this throughout all my work, by the way, that I always think about these literary interfaces between black literature and hip hop culture, but I'm an East Coast guy who spent most of his life in the Mid-Atlantic. You'll see that bias in my music all the time, that the artists I'm talking about are from the regions that I've been around. And so I was not thinking broadly about Southern rappers in this conceptualization, but the figure is just about thinking about how Bigger Thomas is alienated within the narrative of Native Son, What are the socioeconomic and social justice challenges and gendered challenges that he's confronted with? How does he deal with them? How does the media within the narrative world of Native Son depict him? And taking all of those things and mapping them in some ways onto certain rappers' characterizations of themselves within hip-hop culture. And so in the piece, I talk about DMX and Biggie Smalls and Tupac. This is the low-hanging fruit for bigger figures in hip-hop, right? The people who are most popular, who have had run-ins with the law, who've had the media depictions that are comparable to the kinds of media depictions that we see of Bigger Thomas within Native Son. And I just kind of wrestle with that throughout the piece. And what's interesting, you can look to the South and see a number of figures. I think Scarface is a bigger figure within hip-hop culture. There's ways in which there's a way in which more Southern rappers fit the trope than Mid-Atlantic, East Coast rappers. One, because Bigger Thomas, remember, is in Richard Wright's imagination is someone who's a part of that migratory trajectory from the South into the North. Part of his alienation is a second generational alienation, right? He's alienated as a second generation Northerner whose family comes from the South and is dealing with all these sort of dream deferred issues. And so it's important to think back, and you need to do this work, by the way, to think back about how there are so many Southern rappers who kind of reclaim that. When you think about UGK, right? Yes. When you think about even if you go through, yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? When you think about those guys, they're bigger figures.